We as players crave balance, maybe even above all else. And in this respect, Street Fighter 6 has been pretty good. In comparison with other Street Fighters and even other fighting games, there really hasn't been an overly egregious game state in terms of balance. And that's something that should be commended. All the patches that have released have been in the right direction. There may be some decisions that I didn't agree with, but overall the devs have been doing a really good job. Reasonable buffs and not really gutting anything unnecessarily. But we're not here to criticize the balance patches. Well, a little, but that's not what we're focusing on. Throughout the history of Street Fighter 6's characters, so far, there has been one constant, and that constant has been Edmond Honda being the worst character in the game. This isn't necessarily a bad thing by itself. Every game will end up having a worst character, and there's not much anyone can do about it. And because of how good the balance in 6 is, it's not that big a deal. Most characters have been viable, but Honda has been consistently not. I said that Honda was bottom 1, so why is he so bad? First of all, he's not unplayable, not anymore. After the last 2 patches, he's gone from unplayable to just bad. And the disparity between characters isn't very vast, once again 6 is pretty balanced, so Honda is still playable, don't worry. But before we get really critical and negative, let's talk about Honda's strengths. Believe it or not, this bottom 1 character does have some tools that others wish they had. First of all, he has decent corner carry. While it isn't on the levels of a character like Ken, he still has a relatively easy time getting you to the corner, and getting corner in 6 is really good. Next up, he has a pretty good 5 frame, a fast button that goes a decent distance and can go into some decent moves. And a continuation of that point, Honda has pretty good light conversions. Lights into headbutt is pretty good, and if they're standing, lights into butt slam is actually really good. And if he gets off a big punish counter, he has good damage off of that too. His small hits are pretty good, and his big hits are pretty good, which means his damage is relatively consistent, which is good. Honda is also one of the few characters with a command grab, a grab that you can't break and you need to commit with a jump or a backdash. Having a command grab makes your offense more threatening, and Honda has one. It being 6 frames is also good as a drive reversal punish. Next up, he has his OD sumo walk. 2 bars and a decent potential way of getting in, and plus enough to threaten the command grab I mentioned earlier. If you don't check this, you'll have to guess. But it is checkable, to be fair. Speaking of OD moves, OD butt slam is pretty good. Big hitbox, 6 frame startup, a fast jump scare neutral if you can keep down charge, and plus 2 if they aren't ready. Honda also has a fast level 1. 7 frame startup is good. OD headbutt is an answer to most safe jumps. They're just forced to use lights when you have 2 bars to spend. Honda also has light headbutt. It needs charge, but it controls space very well and can be threatening. Those are the good things that Honda has, but there are 2 things that he has that are really good. The first thing is his anti-airs. Honda has arguably the best anti-air suite in the entire game. If he has charge, light headbutt has anti-air invulnerability starting from frame 4. Jumping at a Honda with charge is not a good idea. And even without charge, Honda has his stand heavy punch, a good disjointed hitbox, and upper body invulnerability. It is very hard to get in on Honda from the air. That's the first thing, but the strongest tool Honda has in his arsenal is this. His stand medium punch is kind of absurd. Moves him forward, gives advantage on block, and has a really good hitbox. It's also extremely hard to whiff punish. Not too many recovery frames. Sure, the move is slow, with the startup of a heavy despite being a medium, but that doesn't really matter when it does basically everything else. It's cancelable, both special and drive rush, and is plus 6 on hit, meaning you don't want to get clipped by it. Honda's neutral really comes down to this one button, big, advancing, and forces you into an uncomfortable scenario every time it's blocked. If a top player is complaining about Honda, there's a very good chance this is what they are unhappy with. Honda isn't worthless. I just spent all that time singing his praises, but it's important to remember that the OD walk was added last patch, and the forward advancement along with additional plus frames on hit on the stand medium punch was added in a patch before that. So when he didn't have those things, he was much worse. But that's not the point. The point is, those are Honda's positives. Now let's actually get into why this character is so weak. First of all, he has poor walk speed. He has a below average forward walk speed, but is tied with having the worst back walk speed in the game. Having fast walk speed means you are more threatening in neutral, with greater potential to threaten closing in the distance, or to force an opponent to whiff. Honda's walk speed doesn't give him an advantage in this regard. Speaking of neutral, Honda has pretty long recovery on his pokes, specifically stand heavy punch and crouch heavy punch. This makes his options at relatively long ranges risky, which makes him less threatening in those ranges. And it also adds on to an issue I'll bring up later. Continuing on his neutral woes, Honda doesn't have a good low. Crouching medium kick does hit low and is plus when drive rushed, but is relatively slow. Cannot be special cancelled without his sumo spirit stocked, and cannot be cancelled into drive rush. Without a good low, Honda has a hard time checking or punishing backwards movement, which makes it even harder for him to get in. No good low also means no reliable way of punishing an opponent's shimmy attempt on defense. And we'll get to his defense in a bit, don't worry. Honda also retains his weakness from previous games. He's not very good against fireballs. He does have some answers though. OD Headbutt gives him 2 hits of armor while surging him towards the opponent, and level 2 Super also has invulnerability so he can go through them. But neither of these options are very good. Both require charge, and both are too slow to be a consistent answer. You need to be on point with your timing and your spacing, or you will explode when they block your costly move. But being weak to fireballs isn't a big deal. You may hear all these weaknesses and think, well, he's a charge character, right? So shouldn't his charge move more than make up for all of these? Doesn't Honda have a strong charge move that shores up all his weaknesses in neutral and his inability to get in? Honda is a charge character, and he has 2 charge moves, his headbutt and his butt slam. Both of these moves do hurt if they end up hitting, and if they get blocked, you can't be punished, and you get to take a solid chunk out of their drive gauge. Heavy and medium headbutt occupy a lot of space, and help Honda control space. Is what you would think, right? But this is the weaknesses section, and I'm here to tell you that headbutt is actually pretty bad. I talked about light headbutt earlier, but he has 2 other headbutts that don't live up to the hype. Medium and heavy headbutt are not good, because of this. These headbutts are slow enough that at high level, an opponent should be able to consistently perfect parry it. Which means against a competent opponent, headbutt is just a free hit for them. And even if they don't get the perfect parry off, if they just parry the headbutt, they don't get their drive chip, and now you're just out of throw range, minus, as a character without defensive options. And normal butt slams have the same perfect parry problem. Sure, they're plus if you get them off, but the moves are so slow that an attentive player doesn't need a guess left-right, they just need to get the perfect parry timing. And that's ignoring the near common counterplay of neutral jump cross-up that beats all normal butt slams. And certain characters have vertical anti-airs that can just turn this option off. Even though Honda is a charge character, all his charge options lose to the universal mechanic of perfect parry, and they lose hard. And speaking of universal mechanics, we need to talk about the other impactful universal mechanic, drive rush. Unfortunately, Honda has an underwhelming drive rush. It's not very fast, and doesn't go very far, which limits his options even more. Is Honda's neutral game weak? No. Stand medium punch does a lot of the heavy lifting, and makes him present when competing in that regard. But his neutral is one-dimensional, which is not great. And because of the limitations of relying on just one button and the occasional OD walk, this character has no real way of getting in. And that is a big issue. So he has no way of getting in. No big deal. Many characters don't have ways of getting in, and can still remain very powerful and very prominent members of the metagame. A lack of approach options in isolation won't condemn a character to failure, So let's look at his other problems. Honda's supers 1 and 2 don't give him Oki from mid-screen, so getting these off when they aren't cornered won't leave you in advantage. The level 1 not doing this isn't too big an issue, as you can stock up Sumo Spirit with it. There is some upside. But the level 2 doesn't give advantage and doesn't give you a chance to stock up. Not great. Here's something that really matters. I went over Honda's command grab and how it was a great boon to have. But here's an issue with it. If you do land the command grab, you're no longer in advantage. Your offense ends up being less scary because they could always choose to take the command grab, and now your pressure is over. Zangief's command grab is similar, but his spinning pile driver does so much damage, and he can drive rush in after with a stand light kick for advantage. So it really isn't a concession from the player on defense. They're in a bad position either way. Zangief gets a 1-bar Oki scenario, Honda gets nothing, meaning his offense isn't as deep as would initially seem. But now we've gotten to a point that really matters. Honda is one of the few characters in the game that doesn't have a corner throw loop. In Street Fighter 6, everyone has access to the universal defensive option of perfect parry, making the offensive option of the strike much weaker. And to make up for that powerful defensive option, on offense, players have access to throws that loop. Once they take the throw, the player on defense is put in a position where they have to make the same guess again, which leads to scenarios like this.
Oh, every hit, every throw, a cheer, oh my God. 3 in a row, 4, don't do it so high, 5, no more will do it! Oh.
Throw loops are pretty controversial, but none of that matters because Honda doesn't have one. Honda can't even just drive rush after his throw to set up strike throw mix. He has to first commit to a button before he can have genuine strike throw mix. This makes him weak to perfect parry, and if he doesn't press the button, all he has is strike command grab mix, which opens up jumping. His drive rush isn't fast enough, like Marissa's is, to drive rush, choose neither of these options, and not lose to reversal. This means, despite his command grab, Honda actually has relatively weak offense. If they just take the throw, Honda's offense is over. While it's true that not every character has a throw loop, they usually have other strengths that more than make up for this lack of offense. And in this case, Honda does not. Not having a throw loop is a huge gap in his offense, and a big part of why he's weak. Honda doesn't have great offense, also not too big a deal. So what about his defense? I did talk about how he has a fast level 1, but that's where the positives stop. He does have the aforementioned armored Oki headbutt, but again, an anti-strike option isn't all that great by itself in a game where universally everyone has perfect parry. The important point to get here is, he doesn't have an invincible 2-bar reversal. No OD Shoryuken, no OD flash kick, no OD rising tackle. A concession that Honda would want is an anti-throw option, but he doesn't have that either. The combination of no reversal and the lack of a cancelable low-medium kick, as stated earlier, mean that Honda is very restricted on defense, making his defense weak and exploitable. So Honda has one-dimensional neutral, weak offense, and weak defense. Is there anything else wrong with him? Sadly, yes. Another huge problem that he has is in a game like Street Fighter 6 or Drive Rush Fighter 6, Honda unfortunately doesn't have a good button to check it. Almost all his moves are too slow to consistently stop an opponent's drive rush. The best option he has is OD Headbutt, but that not only requires charge, but 2 bars of drive gauge that you're willing to part with in exchange for their 1, which leaves checking drive rush consistently to be a big issue for this character. Honda ends up being a charge character that can't stand his ground, even with charge. Another thing, all of his strong tools get obliterated by armor. Headbutt and Butt Slam just lose to any armored move, and Stand Medium Punch forces Honda into unfavored guessing in order to not get hit, which is why these matchups are so bad. The rest are just small grievances, so let's run through them really fast. Stand Light Kick is literally useless, and Stand Medium Kick is only used for this Oki setup, otherwise these buttons actually serve no purpose. Awful Sweep, slow, goes nowhere, doesn't punish anything. He has a big hurt box, which can be a negative in certain scenarios. It does make the Gao matchup slightly better, But that doesn't matter because Guile annihilates Honda. And Clap is just there. With all that being said, all his flaws being laid bare, here's a matchup chart for him. It's not as bad as you would have thought, right? Like I said, game is still pretty balanced. He even has a few winning matchups. So I'll go over those real quick. Headbutt shuts down everything Terry wants to do outside of OD Fireball. And Blanca's tools are unfavorable into Stand Medium Punch combined with Headbutt. Honda can generally keep them out pretty well. Honda can shut down air approaches, so Cammy is forced to be grounded, where he can keep her at bay. Kimberly's approach options aren't good into Stand Medium Punch. Bison can't really get in through the air, and Neutral Jump Heavy Punch is already something Honda does, and it shuts down Scissors. Honda does a pretty good job of keeping Lily out with OD Headbutt so she can't get her offense going. Everyone else he either goes even with or loses. So hopefully you understand why this character is weak, but I wouldn't blame you if you didn't understand why this character is so hated. After all, why would people dislike a weak character?
I genuinely think that Street Fighter 6 Honda is one of the worst fighting game characters I've ever had the displeasure of playing against.
Earlier I talked about how Headbutt was bad, but there was a caveat behind it. Headbutt is bad because high-level players can consistently perfect parry it. So what if you can't? Players who haven't put in the time to get this consistent execution check have to deal with the terror of Honda threatening them from anywhere on the screen, as well as the threat of immediate plus frames whenever Honda does a butt slam. For players that can't threaten perfect parry, Honda is an absolute menace.
Oh no, I genuinely think Honda is horribly designed in Street Fighter 6. I genuinely believe that.
But the game has been out for a while now, and players are good enough to be able to consistently perfect parry. So why are these players unhappy with Honda? This is why. I talked about how Stand Medium Punch is his strongest tool, and how it makes his neutral one-dimensional. It is one-dimensional, but it's still powerful and oppressive. It's not easy to whiff punish, and it goes really far. That means not only is it annoying to play against, see all the reasons it's strong, but playing against and maybe even losing to an opponent only pressing one button is very frustrating. Players are able to give more leeway to powerful techniques when they appear to take more skill to pull off, which is why Doomfist was more hated in Overwatch 1 than Widowmaker. And the opposite is true. If something feels less skillful, people will dislike it and feel frustration. Other characters can mix in a variety of viable options, changing their approach each time. All Honda has is his Stand Medium Punch, which forces him to play this way. Now, is lots of Stand Medium Punch with occasional light headbutts and OD walks mixed in unskillful? Maybe. That's debatable, but it for sure frustrates a lot of other players. And so, Honda is relatively disliked, not by just the less experienced players, not by just the high-level players, but by everyone. Honda right now doesn't really have an identity. Perfect parry neutralizes what would seem to be his strong charge options. His command grab isn't scary enough to make him play as a full-fledged grappler, and his inability to check drive rushes keep him from being a defensive powerhouse. The conclusion I'm arriving at here is subjective, but because of this lack of identity, the lack of any satisfying strong tools or playstyle, Honda isn't fun or satisfying to play. He really doesn't have a draw. I said earlier that a bad character isn't inherently a bad thing. Someone does have to get the short stick. And it's okay to have a character that nobody likes to play against. A big part of Nemo's brand is his extreme dislike of Zangief. But a character that feels lacking to play, or isn't satisfying to play, is a negative. And if a character is all three, then you've got yourself a problem. You don't want a character that frustrates the opponent and the pilot at the same time. And if on top of all that, the character is not very strong, you end up with a character that nobody has any reason to play. And that's no good. But I don't want to end on a negative note, so I will conclude with some solutions. How can we fix Honda? First off, we're not going to nerf his Stand Medium or his charge moves. I think it's okay for characters to have strong options. Look at Zangief's spinning pile driver over the years. And I don't want to go over the top, so I'll propose two potential changes. First one is, make his crouching medium punch 7 frame startup instead of 8. This gives him a good dedicated drive rush check, and helps Honda be this wall of a defensive character. You may have to change some of his combo routes so they don't get better, but I think this is a fair change. That would be enough to put him in contention for not bottom 1. But if y'all don't like that, we could try this other change. Give him a real 1-bar drive rush throw loop. I mentioned earlier how characters like Marissa can drive rush after a throw and be plus enough to block the reversal if she chooses to do nothing. And I think Honda can have that too. This plugs a massive hole in his offense and makes him more threatening once he actually gets the hit. And I genuinely think either of those are all he needs. And if you want to make him good, make crouch medium kick +1 on block, or make level 2 super emotion input, and it patches up a huge weakness he has. This one is a bit more contentious because it does change the identity of the character, but Zangief has anti-fireball on his level 2, so I don't think it's out of the question. The character only needs just that little bit. Characters will be contextually bad. It's a part of balance, it's a part of life. But a big roster means character variety. More characters for more playstyles. More playstyles means more players can find enjoyment in a game. A character can be bad, but they shouldn't be consistently bad. Nor should they be indisputably bottom 1